Welcome to RPG Reanimators, a podcast for GMs where we dissect horror scenarios and offer our experiences and advice to reanimate them at the table. I'm Nathan.
I'm Alex.
I'm Holly.
I'm Lex.
And I'm Jason.
Well, let's see who's in the waiting room. Today, we're examining the blurred found footage aberration that is the world of public access. We'll examine the mysterious setting of Deep Lake and the revelations of the TV Odyssey tapes and how to run this game for your table. We're joined by Jason Cordova, the creator of Public Access, The Between, and Brindlewood Bay, as well as many other projects with the Gauntlet community. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jason.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Now, let's begin our consultation. So, Jason, to get us started out, easy question. What is public access?
Public Access is a tabletop role-playing game about a group of young people in 2004. They all meet on a forum. Basically, it's a forum for people who remember this public access TV station that no one else remembers. And so they go on this online forum to talk about their memories of it. And this particular group of characters, they all grew up in this small town in New Mexico where the station was located. And they all remember the station, but of course nobody else does. And so they decide one summer in 2004 to go back to this little town, Deep Lake, New Mexico, and try to just see if they can find out what happened, look into it. The game it's an analog horror influenced game, found footage horror influence, lots of creepypasta and urban legends influence, as well as being very, very soaked in nostalgia. It very much lives in kind of 80s and 90s pop culture.
Yeah, the character sheet I noticed has a few just little slight references to things from the era to get you in the vibe. Yeah, here and there. Yeah, so the characters are all, they're called the latchkeys, right?
Indeed.
And they're just investigators kind of for the purposes of this.
Yeah, they're just, importantly, they're just regular people. They're like people in their 20s. I was in my 20s in 2004, so that's very much kind of based on my own life in some sense, at least that part of it. And yeah, they have just a kind of normal, mundane lives. They don't have any particular skills or talents related to investigating mysteries. But when they get to Deep Lake, the game starts when they've actually been in Deep Lake for a couple of weeks and they haven't really made any progress on like this TV station called TV Odyssey. But then word gets around that they're kind of looking into weird mysteries in and around the town. And so some other mysteries get dropped into their laps. And that's actually like the principal part of gameplay is investigating the various mysteries that kind of fall into their laps. And then eventually they get their hands on these components called the Odyssey tapes, which are sort of artifacts, episodes of shows that aired on TV Odyssey, these weird, strange tapes. And all of it begins to connect up into like the sort of, what is the weirdness of this place? What happened to this TV station?
It's interesting that you note that all of the PCs are kind of regular people who decided to come out here and rent a house for some time to do these investigations throughout the town. Something that we can sometimes struggle with in a system like Call of Cthulhu is it can be hard to get regular folks really hooked into a narrative and this is why you're here, here's your motivation. And I'm really curious if you have any thoughts or advice for players to try and create a character who may have a deeper impetus to come here. If it would be something like getting laid off from a job or having some kind of significant life disruption. So that's why they've kind of thrown their responsibilities to the side. They may have a week or two to be here. I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so character creation is a pretty structured process in the game. You can finish it in like 5 minutes. The character sheets you just kind of make some choices and you're good to go. However, one of the things you have to do is you'll be asked to like talk about 3 different like parts of your background that kind of help define you a little bit more. So the characters are defined mechanically by a move, their latchkey move, which is like the the closest thing to like a special power or ability they have. And then just these like little historical bits. So what did you do? Like where you came from, like what was your job? What do you hope to accomplish? Like what are your goals and aspirations? And then do you have a significant other as well? And that tends to be enough to kind of lay a foundation for like the role play and for people to kind of get going. Based off that, part of the character creation and character introduction is you kind of give this little bit of backstory about yourself, and then everyone else gets to say something that you brought with you to Deep Lake. And so that becomes kind of your, essentially like your starting equipment. It's like the stuff that's found in the house, your corner of the house that you've rented. And so, yeah, it's a pretty light touch. The characters are characters that have a lot of like, I would say like childhood trauma. That's a major theme of the game. They have a lot of baggage, but it's not something you explore right away. My games are entirely uninterested in exploring your backstory in the beginning. It is all about revealing it as you play when the mechanics prompt you to do so. So in general, you kind of hold back on your backstory. That's much more the case in my other game, The Between, than it is here, where it's a hard rule in The Between. You cannot talk about your past in or out of character. But in this one, you're still kind of encouraged to like keep the like real juicy stuff, like kind of keep it back until you're prompted to share more, basically. Yeah.
Right. And a lot of this system really seems to be focused on kind of getting a vibe and then coming up with something very engaging or interesting sort of in the moment as you get these exciting ideas, and players can contribute to the narrative too. So maybe that is less of a concern for players, that it's just I'm here now, and then you can figure out why, as something really compelling may come up later on.
You are hooked in constantly. My whole game design, the Gauntlet's whole play ethos is that, like, yes, often there is a GM or a keeper at the table, but it is very much like a shared world building exercise. There's lots of opportunities for players to like kind of build out the world and to say what is true in the world. And so as far as like getting engaged, like that part's pretty easy. Like people, like basically as soon as you arrive at the first mystery, you know, you're straight away being asked questions of like, oh, how do you know this family enjoyed one last day of fun in the sun before they disappeared? And then everybody's talking about it and you're off to the races, right? So
yeah, that's a really great design, because you offload all that game master work on the players, so the keeper has more bandwidth to think of description, vibes.
Focus on good stuff, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the players really always seem to come up with worse things than I ever would anyways. And then I can just be like, yeah, that was in there the whole time. Great. What are some other like inspirational vibe setting things we can look at for this?
Well, so I think your best bet, probably the most like direct inspiration, is the creepypasta story Candle Cove. That is like the direct like arrow to the heart inspiration of the game in terms of media resources, because that is I don't want to spoil it, but it's basically a creepypasta story about a bunch of people on a forum who are talking about this kid's TV show that only they remember, right? And so that's one thing. But honestly, like any kind of there are certain like YouTube channels like Local 58, or like I would even go so far as to say the Backrooms, because Public Access is a lot of cosmic and kind of weird horror and interdimensional horror to it. Those are all really good touchstones. Anything with like kind of an analog vibe is a great touchstone for this game. My own personal inspirations, it's actually a really, really personal game in a lot of ways. Like the sort of like analog horrorness of it and the urban legendsness of it is kind of really just a veneer or a coating for what is essentially like me like trying to recontextualize a lot of like personal stuff and put it in game form, you know? So I'm not sure how easy it is to explore that stuff. You know?
Yeah.
Is that why, as I was looking through this stuff, I was thinking like, why 2004? Like, what's the significance of that? Is that kind of coming from that personal space?
Well, yeah, I like that year because I think that was the first year for me as an adult when I kind of felt like I was really becoming an adult, you know, like I would have been in 2004, I would have been, let's see, I don't remember, I would in my early 20s. Right. And it was the first time I kind of had like a proper like adult job that I, you know, like I kind of had my own money and I was kind of doing my own thing and I felt really independent. And I think I started to have at that time, like a lot of like, kind of started thinking about the past, and like the things that like I kind of gave up, my childhood, you kind of like let go, when you finally like kind of grow up, I had been kind of pondering this game for years and years, and I never really had the framework to do anything with it until Brindlewood Bay happened. And then I kind of, from Brindlewood Bay, all good things for me at least flow. But like there was this really like particular incident in my childhood, if I can like go back here a little bit. One of my absolute earliest memories, like my core memories from when I was like maybe 5 years old, my family and we are moving to California from Oklahoma. And so we are caravanning with our aunt and uncle in one car, and then my family's in another car. We're like on the road, and it's the middle of the night, and we must have been in Arizona or New Mexico, somewhere that part of the country. Really, really late at night, my mom's driving our car. I'm awake for some reason. My dad's asleep, and totally dark, except as we kind of go down the road, we see this guy standing on the side of the road, and he's wearing a cowl and a robe, and he's just standing there on the side of the road. And like my mom slowed down just a little bit because she was worried about like hitting him or whatever, and we got a good look at him, and he's just like standing there. It was really strange. And a little bit later, I'm sure I'm like backfilling a lot of these memories. It's not exactly how I remember it. That's kind of another theme of the game, is like how your memories betray you, But I remember my mom being really freaked out. And then I remember when we stopped to get gas, my aunt was driving the other car, and they both got out, and they were terrified. Like they were both like freaking out. They were like, who was that guy? What was that? They were like so freaked out. And my uncle and my dad are just like, they're like barely awake, And I have thought about that every day of my life since. I have thought about that fear. I have thought about that guy. Who was that guy? Like, I want to know who that guy was in the cowl standing on the side of the road, And so on some level, like public access is that. It's like, it's this idea that maybe there's something out there in the desert. Maybe there's something that we are not meant to know. Maybe the land is ancient. Maybe there is something going on just beneath the surface. It's almost a very like David Lynch kind of idea too, right? So that's sort of what public access is. It's this idea of the ancient desert. It's this idea of cosmic horror. It's this idea of your childhood memories betraying you. It's all those things. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, have you ever read Mr. Magic by Kirsten White?
I have. I read that 2 years ago.
Oh, nice.
And I liked it well enough. I wouldn't say it was my favorite book.
It was fine. It was a solid like 3 out of 5.
Yeah, it was just okay. But yeah, no, it was. I was like specifically looking for books. I was like, well, are there any like kind of books like this? Because I was just as I'm always like trying to absorb media touchstones, and I found that one at that time. Yeah. It was fine.
Yeah, it hit some of those vibes. It was a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that probably touches well for a lot of our players who are Call of Cthulhu Delta Green players, is that idea that like there's just that one little detail on the surface that then you start digging into, and it just escalates and escalates, and pretty soon, you're looking at the face of God and going, I gotta kill this thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit. You talked about Brindlewood Bay a bit. I wanted to talk about the general system, since it is carved from Brindlewood, and people might not be as familiar with that. Again, Call of Cthulhu, guys. It doesn't have a D100. You're rolling 2D6s.
I will say a lot more than were last week, though. Or a lot more now than were last week because of Quinn's. But yeah,
yes, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Suddenly it's like, oh man, my thing is broken containment. Fully. No, sorry, keep going. Yeah.
No, I guess can you kind of talk a little bit about the system and then the day-night move? I think that's a pretty compelling aspect to this.
Yeah, I think the probably the most, when it first came out, it was controversial. I think we've pretty well settled into it in the hobby now, but maybe not Call of Cthulhu players, but certainly
it's a tough sell. Yeah,
the indie narrative side of the hobby has settled into it. The controversial thing about the system is that the mysteries don't have a canonical solution, right? So I, as the keeper, don't know the answer to the mystery. In the case of Brindlewood Bay, I don't know who did the murder. Brindlewood Bay is about a group of elderly ladies solving murder mysteries, and I don't know who did the murder. in public access. I don't know what happened to the family on Escondido Street. And so the players are going to be gathering clues as their characters kind of roam around. They'll be gathering clues. And these clues can kind of be found wherever they're looking, right? It's kind of up to the keeper to like decide on which clue and, make sense in the scene and kind of recontextualize it as needed, And then they're going to have a conversation when they have enough clues and when they're satisfied that they have a good answer. They're going to actually engage in some deduction based off the clues they have and come up with a solution to the question, or the, who did the murder? What happened to the family? Like, what is the deal here? And there's a little formula that you do a dice roll with based off the number of clues you incorporate into your solution. And then you roll to see if you're correct. If you're not correct, if you roll poorly, you might still be correct, but just the world reacts in a really strong way, right? But in any case, you're kind of rolling to see if you're correct. If you're correct, but there's a really big complication with your theory that you have to contend with, or maybe you're totally wrong, and the keeper kind of like hits you hard with like a really strong negative reaction that you have to kind of contend with. And so I would say that's like the big like kind of highlight feature of Carve from Brindlewood. Mm-hmm. The system is made up of all kinds of components, though. That's sort of the mystery part of it, but it actually has a lot of like kind of real distinct features that I think are still kind of novel in the hobby. You asked about the day-night move, and the day-night move is the move you roll whenever you do something risky or when you face something you fear. So if you do something risky, you roll the day or night move. If you are just in a situation that's scary, you roll the day or night move. And what's great about this move, I don't know how familiar you are with Powered by the Apocalypse games, but
familiar.
Most PBTA moves are some variation of when you do something risky, roll some dice. On a 10 plus, you do it. On a 7-9, you do it, but there's a complication. On a miss, the GM reacts or the MC reacts.
Yeah, bad things.
Bad things, yeah. That sort of like middle part and the miss condition, but the middle part, especially the 7-9, is really hard. And it's a thing that a lot of like PBTA MCs get tripped up on, right? Mm-hmm. The day-night move actually kind of assists the keeper in a really big way. So whenever you do this risky thing or face something you fear, you're going to say what you're scared is going to happen right now. So I am trying to break into a house, or I am walking down this really, really poorly lit corridor in the haunted house. What are you afraid is going to happen right now? Well, I'm afraid that some kind of creature is clinging to the ceiling right now and is watching me. Okay. It's the night move. So the night move is a little harder. The keeper says, well, here's how it's worse than that. How it's worse than that is that creature's going to jump down and disembowel you, right? And so then if the character wants to keep going down the corridor based off knowing what the stakes are, the player, that is, the character doesn't know, but the player does, right. Then you roll some dice, and then you make the narration kind of fit the stakes that you kind of worked out between the player and the keeper. Mm-hmm. And so it's this idea of the players at a player level help set the stakes of the scene, right? My games, and indeed the games from the kind of vector of the hobby I come from, it's very much about like, we talk about the game above the table. We talk about the game as players, not as characters, and we set stakes and we talk about things almost like as if we were writers on a TV show, right?
And would you have any advice for GMs in how to carry out those kinds of conversations? It's something that I've always find very interesting with these Carved from Brindlewood systems, pardon me, is that it really turns the tables on what I'll just refer to as kind of the traditional GMing structure, where typically it's a very rigid investigation that the keeper has totally locked down, and then the PCs can do whatever they want. Right. This is a much more rigid kind of structure to operate within, but the players have a lot more agency to add and contribute things within this structure. So it may feel very atypical for folks, especially coming into this for the first time. And, I always am concerned about what if you get a player that isn't matching the vibe? Like, what if you get a player who may be kind of overstepping the contributions? Like you say, it can't solve the clue, but like, I find a gun. And it's like, all right, cool, another gun. So I'm curious if you have any advice for how to deal with things like that, especially for newer GMs to this system.
Well, so like the thing about the day-night move specifically is, I think and this is true of all Powered by the Apocalypse games, of which, Carve from Brindlewood is derived from PBTA on some level, right? At just a sort of basic level, it's really important to understand that the dice don't hit the table as often in these games, right?
Yeah.
In these games, we roll dice to resolve a whole scene, right? Like when dice hit the table, it's because we're ready to resolve the scene. And there might be a second follow-up die roll if the first die roll goes kind of poorly, but you are not rolling for every little transaction, right? Like you're not rolling every time you go down this hall or go down that or open this door, or you just kind of talk and kind of go back and forth until you get to like a scary moment or a moment of risky action in the case of my games, and then you roll the day and night move. And the structure, if you read the move, like it takes you through it. Like the player has to say what they're afraid is going to happen, and the keeper has to respond. In the case of the night move, here's how it's worse than that, right? And you know, it is the case that sometimes, it's rare in my experience, but it is the case sometimes that like players say something that's just completely illogical or nonsensical or just way off tone or something, right? And the keeper is advised in the book to just ignore such recommendations and go ahead, just do whatever you want, right? but
Here's how it's not that.
Yeah, I think what most keepers will find though is that like the first time as a keeper, you sort of like portray the world honestly and respond honestly to what they're saying. They are immediately invested as players and they want to do the right thing, right? So if the character is trying to accomplish something and you make it really clear what could go badly here, the player will love it if they succeed and they accomplish it, but also they'll love it equally if they succeed and the bad thing happens, because it kind of like reinforces a sense of like honesty at the table, right? You know, and so you pretty quickly, it doesn't really become much of an issue. People are usually pretty invested in like doing, you know, kind of like contributing in the right way, you know?
Yeah, I love that honor system, the expectation that, hey, we're all at this table playing a horror game. And speaking of your example of that monster on that ceiling, that it's a night move. If you fail, it's going to disembowel you. So let's say your character gets disemboweled.
Yep.
Latchkey move. So what are those?
So in the instance where your character gets disemboweled, the latchkey moves no longer have anything to say about it. Your character gets disemboweled. So if you roll if those were the stakes that we set,
right,
and you roll a 3, you know, or something, a 6 or lower, since you knew what the stakes were and I told you how it was worse, I am now as the keeper going to describe the creature dropping down from the ceiling and disemboweling your character, killing them.
Right.
But
you can turn a key.
Yes. So all of my games have this like little failsafe, this little pressure valve. In the case of public access, it's called turning a key. So on the character sheet, you have these 2 parts of the sheet. One's called the key of the child and one's called the key of desolation. And the key of the child is like your history. It's like your personal childhood story, right? Like it's a lot about your trauma and your like, you know, kind of the stuff you went through as a kid. And in exchange for marking a box, there's like 7 boxes, and each of them is like a narrative prompt that basically instructs the player to narrate a flashback. In exchange for narrating that flashback, you get to bump up your die roll as if it was not a miss, but instead a 7 to 9. You can bump up any die roll. You could take a 7 to 9 to a 10 or a 10 to a 12, right? But most people will save it for when they get disemboweled by the creature on the ceiling. And so you can mark that. And so in exchange for like giving us a little bit of your backstory at a really, really dramatically impactful moment in the game, you get to basically rewind, kind of choose your own adventure style. You get to go back and try another way, and you get to see a different kind of outcome. So in my games, you both get to die a lot, but also you don't. So you get to see your character die, but we kind of like do a little alternate timeline thing where you didn't die. So,
which is also a really great mechanic for players to feel fulfilled at exploring every angle that they want. Like oftentimes with other games like Call of Cthulhu, we may hear something awful happening behind a door and it's like, oh man, I really want to know what's in there, but I don't want to die, so I'm just gonna sneak past it.
No, my games, you go for it. Yeah,
exactly.
You go for it.
Like instead of having that unfulfilled, you just like, all right, I'm gonna poke my head in, whoop, and then rewind. Prince of Persia back out.
You don't have a head anymore. Oh, turn a key.
Yeah. And knowing the stakes and having the player kind of set them too is really smart from like a safety side too, because that gets an angle that the player's coming in and you kind of already have that set to go like, all right, I know they're okay with kind of this direction.
Yeah. It's really interesting. There's a certain, the Gauntlet, which is my gaming community and also the name of my publishing company. before we were into publishing, for years before that, we just ran games. Like, we just were playing. We had a game calendar, and it was a public game calendar. We ran all kinds of things. And back in those days, it was like Monster Hearts and Dungeon World and things like that, right? And we really, really developed a really distinct Gauntlet play culture, right? Like, there's a really, really distinct play culture that is all about like collaborative storytelling, and that is all about like kind of shared narrative responsibility, and like GM prep, but smart GM prep, not like a slog GM prep, you know?
Yeah.
We had this like kind of culture, and I'm very happy that like in recent years in our publications, especially post Brindlewood Bay, we've really been able to like kind of take that play culture and kind of like codify it, you know, and make it like replicable at your table by following the rules of the games, right? So and most people find it's a really distinct feel at the table. So
Yeah, I think for us, one of the biggest times when we play it is that bit you mentioned up front of the kind of conversing and throwing theories around and trying to incorporate all the clues, because you get like the little red string moment where it's like, oh, what about this and this and this? And then, someone might say, well, wait, that doesn't explain the flamingo, and then you have to go back and be like, okay, can we bring this guy in?
If I'm your keeper, I press every issue. I'm like, nope, that's not good enough. You need to like go back to this clue, and I need more here. You know, some keepers are more like, like more generous. I'm not. I want everything explained to the T. So
well, I did notice that you've run recently the Bad Spot YouTube channel. Podcast as well. I think it's behind
they
releasing
do
it.
They do an audio podcast, but the audio feed's way behind the video one. Yeah.
And I noticed that as a way you run that is just like you really hold them there of like, you didn't explain this. Like, are you really going to try and solve this unless you explain it?
I become very school marmy about it. Like, we will go through every detail to make sure this is a solid theory before you roll the dice. Yeah, and I encourage all keepers to do that.
That's cool. Yeah. So basically, the players they're dropping these Schrodinger's clues, and we'll see if they are related or not at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like on some level, I mean, like, I get the criticism of like, oh, we didn't really solve a mystery because there was no mystery. Like there was no predetermined solution. And I kind of get that. But on the other hand, when you play D&D, you don't really do magic either, Right. I mean, like there's a lot of things you don't really do. Yeah. So it's like, it's the way I look at it is, this is really kind of philosophical, I guess.
Oh, we love it.
I'm a big believer in like role-playing games as a medium and as a form of entertainment, right? And there are a lot of things that role-playing games cannot do as well as other forms of entertainment, right? We don't have graphics. We don't have actors necessarily. We don't have like a forced perspective of a novel. There's lots of things we don't have, right? But the one thing we do have that no other form of entertainment has is we have this idea of like shared world building and collaborative storytelling, right? And so all of my game designs are very much about like, well, how do we take like that fundamental like advantage that role-playing games have, and how do we like explore that and make the system, how do we take advantage of that basically, to create like a really great experience at the table. And yeah, I'm just a big believer in it. I'm a big believer in collaborative storytelling. I think it's what we're all meant to be doing. Even in the more like kind of traditional or crunchy or like more like GM authored games, I think there still should be room for that. There should be room for that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I love that.
I think it encourages from a creative standpoint, because something that's always held me back from creating anything RPG wise is like, oh, I don't have good ideas. I'm not super creative. And it's like, well, this isn't really something that you have to think through and create this plot and ending and everything else, because so much of it is player input. And I like that.
Yeah. Well, and also like, well, for one thing, you're probably not giving yourself enough credit, Holly. You're probably better than you think.
True.
But
very true.
But no, there. I think I just think it's more satisfying too. Like apart from the fact that like just you don't have as much like cognitive load as the GM or the keeper if that's being dispersed a little bit. I just think it's better. I just think players are more engaged. They like have more buy-in when they help author the story more, and it just kind of creates an experience that like, I don't know, it kind of feels like you all kind of accomplished something of note, you know, at the end.
Yeah, you
I
all
think
built
that's-
this together.
Yeah,
The
I
stories
really
you
do
leave
like
the
that.
table with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And players just they have a lot of agency, and that's important. That's
Yeah.
another thing that RPGs do well. Players have agency. You don't have agency in a movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's even better than video games because like
Yeah.
there's limits there, and here
limited
it's like
by
yeah,
the game
what-
engine,
Yep.
right?
yeah.
Yep.
If you want to say, God shows up, well, here he is. Smite.
And I do think it's worth pointing out though as well, like I do think that, you know, I do think that like solid rules and procedures and
Yeah.
structure have a role to play, right? Like there's a sort of like there's a school of like role-playing game thought that's, you know, that's very like just open the floodgates and we just do strictly theater of the mind. We very rarely touch the any mechanics. It's just like kind of super narrative, and that can be fun, but I actually think that there's something really powerful about having just enough mechanics, you know, to encourage that collaborative storytelling. You know, like somebody might look at my games and like compare it to like a more traditional game and not see as many numbers and not see as many stat lines and monster stats and all that kind of stuff, or like, or the scenarios are like a tenth the length of a scenario.
One
And they
page.
might think there's nothing here, but that's not true. Like they've actually been like game designed to within an inch of their lives to like do a really certain thing in a certain way, you know? So there's something to be said about the like game design and the structure of the game as well. You know, we're not just doing storytelling around the fire, right? Like we're playing a game as well, you know?
Yeah, it ends up getting like a prestige television structure is kind of like the way to do it, because those flashbacks to do like moments of stress, you have a flashback and talk to your dead dad about childhood trauma is 100% like, yep, there you go. That's on HBO.
And you'll be talking about that for days afterwards too, after you do it. Yeah.
And out of curiosity with this, I always get intrigued whenever I look at games that have character sheets or something that has an XP tracker, or that whenever they talk about advancement, because with a lot of systems that we play, there can be a kind of implicit assumption that this will be played out as a longer campaign that we just rarely see happen. It tends to be kind of one-shot dedicated mysteries at a time, that it takes a lot more work to try to string those together. Do you envision players will really run and play this as a continuous campaign following the same kind of group of people at this house, or as a series of isolated investigations that you can kind of have that, you know, a true detective season each time?
It's a campaign, but it's a campaign that ends. This sort of like new edition of the game, I think it lasts about 12 to 15 3-hour sessions, roughly. That takes you from arrival at Deep Lake, character creation, to resolving the TV Odyssey mystery. And you'll do about...
That's really cool.
Yeah, you'll do about maybe between 4 and 6 other mysteries in the middle of that. Structurally, it's I don't know if it's okay to go here now, but like structurally the way it works is you'll have up to 3 active mysteries at any given time that the characters can go explore and can go look into. Periodically they come back home and reminisce about the Ninja Turtles or Neverending Story or whatever it is that takes them back in order to clear conditions that they have acquired. And then as the campaign progresses, it kind of progresses through 5 different layers. And after every actually the new edition is only 3 layers, but as you progress through the layers, different types of things unlock in the world, and the world changes in certain ways. And eventually they have to endure this sort of like home invasion scenario. And then that leads directly to the final mystery of TV Odyssey. And so it is a campaign, but it's a sort of like a limited like 15 session campaign basically, and then it ends. You can keep it going. There's a special type of mystery called the Lost Transmission, which tells like prologue and side stories, and you can kind of use those to sort of like keep the story going or to like lengthen the campaign. But just the straight up TV Odyssey campaign is about 15 sessions.
And you've made it, at least when the ones I watched, you actually have those little side stories. They can impact the characters in the main one, which is fun, kind of like
and they unlock, right? Like you may not get them, right? Like the little side, they're called Lost Transmissions, and basically whenever you trigger one, you basically do a mystery, an isolated mystery from the town's past, but your characters are in it, but they're like kind of alternate timeline versions of their characters.
They all have mustaches.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, but the thing is though, like these like little Lost Transmission mysteries, if you use them in the campaign, they may not happen because it depends on the players doing certain things, watching a certain tape, opening a certain book, making a recipe out of this cookbook. Like they get triggered in certain ways, right? So that's and so if your players don't know that, they may never stumble on it. But but if they do, it's always really cool.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the Odyssey tapes because we mentioned, you'll have 6 or so mysteries, and I think, there's more than 6 out there. You really have a lot to pick from.
There are a lot, yeah.
And these Odyssey tapes, there's even more of them.
Mm-hmm.
Are these kind of the unseens of the public access world?
Yeah. So the reason the characters went to New Mexico in the first place was they were hoping to find these tapes. These tapes are kind of like internet legends, basically, and no one even knows for sure if they exist. And so one of the things you're doing is you are trying to like find these tapes as well. And they will eventually start finding the tapes. Indeed, as soon as the game starts, they've found one, right? And what the tapes are is, in the fiction at least, they are episodes of TV shows that aired on this weird TV station, right? They are profoundly disturbing and bizarre. They're really, really strange. But each of them is like an episode. But what they are in gameplay terms is they're a series of essentially like 4 narrative prompts. And during the night phase, you can, quote unquote, watch an Odyssey tape while the latchkeys are doing their thing. We as players watch the Odyssey tape, right? And what that means is we go around in turn, like telling the story of that episode of the show, or that episode of that show, in turn, by basically responding to the narrative prompts. So it's almost like a little group storytelling thing that we do.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. It's probably it's the thing that people love the most in public access. Like it's like the highlight thing that you do in the game, right? Is do the Odyssey tapes. And they're incredibly dark and scary and really, really weird. Like this is how the game like becomes like super Lynchian, Lovecraftian, really, really creepypasta-esque. Like it's got so much like stuff, like a show of like a puppet in a dimly lit basement with a child who's clearly there under duress, doing like a lesson of the day, or like a weird like kids TV show with like all kinds of strange things happening, or this lady who does a cooking show and she clearly murdered her guests. Like it's that kind of thing, right? And these little like Odyssey tape stories don't have any direct connection to the mysteries that the latchkeys are solving, except in the new edition of the game, at least, they are also the clues that you need to ultimately figure out what happened to TV Odyssey. So they do eventually tie into the bigger mystery of the game, but they're very fun. Like it's the big marquee feature of the game. Like it's like a big reason why you play. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think from like a game master side too, that's fun because it's shared between, we've talked about this before, like when different groups play a scenario, they get to talk about like, oh, what did you do in this? Like, what did you do differently? Mm-hmm. And I feel like the 4 prompts is like the perfect amount to be like, what did you end up with? And how is it so different than what we came up with? And like, how did that affect? I think coming back to it as a story is really fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to get more into the layers and stuff, but there is some stuff I want to keep at the keeper level of discussion here, because I think there's some neat things we'll get to later. But yeah, let's talk a little bit. Holly, I think you have a bit about nostalgia.
Oh yeah, I do love the themes of nostalgia that just kind of bleed through all of your stuff, not just
not just this one. Yeah.
And I think that if I can just like fangirl for a minute, I really appreciate Brindlewood Bay specifically because you are playing such an unlikely hero. And, I think about, we reference Call of Cthulhu like a million times already in this podcast. And I think it's because that's what most of us play. Yeah. And I think that we shy away from, the elderly, the people, because it's like, it's, oh, that's not the hero. That's the person that you have like significant disadvantages and things like that, like even mechanically in Call of Cthulhu. And so I think that's just really lovely that, you can just play a pleasant little old lady or whatever. So
who is going to get wrapped up in a really horrifying occult nightmare, but yeah.
Well, sure, but it's lovely. And, yeah, I just think that's wonderful. And I think we've kind of talked a lot about the themes of nostalgia already, though. Is there anything else that you feel like inspires the systems that you have, just generically, not even public access,
Yeah, nostalgia is a big theme. Brindlewood Bay, of course, like is rooted in this like idea of like American television, right? Like the game is a TV show. You're playing a TV show, right? The Between is probably not so much like nostalgia, except it does have this one aspect to it, which is it's a really intense critique of colonialism. And so in some sense, it's kind of like criticizing the good old days, right? So it is that. But public access, Brindlewood Bay, we have the sequel to public access, or the sort of indirect sequel, is this game called Pizza Time, which is not out yet. It's coming out soon. And it's about a group of kids it's a group of people who are basically spending the last night before it closes, at this kind of weird pizza restaurant a la Chuck E. Cheese's, right?
Five Nights at Freddy's.
It's like Five Nights at Freddy's, but it's Five Nights at Freddy's meets Stephen King's It. I love a log line, and that's nice. That one. And so what it is they were all at a birthday party at this restaurant when they were kids, and there was a big fire, and a bunch of people were like killed and injured, but they all know that like something happened. Like the fire was not just a kitchen fire, like there was something more malevolent going on, and they, that's their trauma. And so they come back to like spend one final night overnight before this restaurant closes forever. They've paid money to do this, to like spend the night at this restaurant and to try to figure out like what really happened that day, So yeah, I have a lot of like Americana is a big influence on my games. Like I discovered public access TV stations were not a thing in other parts of the world. That's kind of a distinctly American thing. Mm-hmm. These sorts of animatronic pizza restaurants are not really a thing in other parts of the world. So there is like this kind of like Americana theme that I think is layered into a lot of my games as well. Queer themes. I always put queer themes in my games. You don't have to like look too hard to find them. They are there, especially with the Between. So I guess I'm always kind of like just absorbing media and being inspired by things. And then I ask myself, wow, wouldn't that be a cool game? And then I try to think like what the game of it would be. And then I kind of put all my hangups in there and boom, there we go. Role-playing game done.
And I think a real charm of that too is by, as you're saying, absorbing a lot of media, incorporating a lot of nostalgia, or these other very personable and relatable elements. Yeah. I think that it's very likely that you're going to tap into a lot of similar things that other people can resonate with and then contribute to with it. Like whenever you're finding that kind of, in this case, you're getting that essential essence of the 80s, 90s nostalgia, but in the 2000s, which is a kind of interesting transitory period where your parents still probably have VCRs in the 2000s. You still have a computer desk. There may be smartphones, laptops are kind of clunky.
That stuff is just going away though, right? Like
exactly.
It's like
so you're at this kind of bridge between these two generations of technology that a lot of players
not quite like happening the way it will, right? And that I think a lot of players can find something to latch onto there and really explore to contribute a lot more to those narratives. It's a good observation, Lex. And I'll tell you also, this is really important for horror, right? Like horror as a genre is really hard in a role-playing game context because it requires a real suspension of disbelief and like approaching the material in a really like earnest way to like approach anything like fear at a role-playing game table, right? Like that's very, very hard to accomplish. And I don't know that necessarily my games do, but I do think it helps a lot if you have to like find ways to like, in a role-playing game in general, we have the basic problem of like getting all of our shared headspaces to like align enough to play the game, right? That's already like a big, hurdle in the hobby that you have to overcome, right? That's where rules come in. But then you add like this sort of like, I want to be scared layer to it, and it makes it even more complicated, right? Like how do you replicate or induce fear at a role-playing game table? And I think one of the ways you can do it is by tapping into that kind of like personal aspect of it, right? You know, like you should be able to tap into something in a way that feels just personal enough for it to be unsettling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you are sympathizing with your character, right? Even if you are not a man of a certain age like me and you were not in your 20s in 2004, you still can like connect with something there, right? And I think that like in my games, we do the extra step of also asking the players to, for example, paint a scene. Tell me about this place.
Yeah.
What does it look like? What does it sound like? What's the idea here? Tell me about it, you know? And then so everyone's kind of like getting bought into that part of it too. And so anytime you can kind of get players to buy into the premise of role-playing game period is great. And a horror role-playing game, even better, you know?
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think that it's also really, really novel and engaging too, as you're saying, with asking players to paint the scene, because typically whenever we're describing settings and environments, we're pulling from past experience. If you say that you're walking into a police station, I'm going to pull from, like, my mom used to work at an old bank. So I kind of go off of that for the creaky wooden floors and the kind of smell of tobacco set into the walls. But then by the player contributing that and the GM making it worse, you're calling on that player to kind of subvert those memories that can lead to a real sense of unsettlement.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And in my games, this idea, paint the scene, is a capitalized term of art in the games, where basically the keeper asks the players a question about whenever they enter a new location. They ask them this question that doesn't just explore like what the place looks or sounds like, but also explores an idea connected to that place, right? So it kind of goes that one extra step further, right? Like in the first mystery, the house on Escondido Street, you can go down into the basement, and the paint the scene question is, looking around, how can you tell the kids were scared to come down here, right? And so the players are going to tell you what they see, but they're going to tell you what they see through this really particular lens of, here's what I see that tells me that the kids were scared to come down here, right? And that kind of like shared storytelling, which uses a really precise leading question to like explore an idea, is really powerful at the table, right? Like super, super powerful. Like, listeners, if you take nothing else from my games, incorporate the paint the scene technique into your Call of Cthulhu games. It will improve them immeasurably. Like, trust me, do it, you know?
Do you have any advice for coming up with painting the scenes like that for folks that do want to come up with their own leading questions?
Yeah. Well, in my games, they're all written out for you. But like before I was writing games, I was doing this just in all my games, just as a kind of technique. And I think for me, it goes back to like their role, which is not just tell me what you see or feel, but tell me about an idea, right? So you've just arrived at this, at this like abandoned town. What do you see on the main street that tells you someone here still cares about this place? Like it's taking that extra step of like, not just what do you see, but like what do we know about this place based off this? And so I would say start with like the idea, like what is the idea that you want to explore here? And then kind of build it off that. Yeah, paint the scene's great. And once you kind of like have it in your GM toolkit or your keeper toolkit, it's like, it will serve you super well. And it's great if I do say so myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
100%.
You kind of like shortcut to an emotion.
Exactly.
Too, with that. And like, you're going from just, it's an abandoned town to there's a wistfulness to this. Why?
Yeah. And I came up with this, or I kind of named it Paint the Scene, and kind of came up with the sort of procedure of it probably in like 2016 when I was running Dungeon World, because I had this like regular frustration with fantasy games, which was we're walking into a space that should feel ornamental. It should feel layered. It should feel like it has a history and a lore behind it. It should not just be, now you're in the castle and here's what you see, right? There should be more to it than that. And so I kind of came up with these ideas of like, okay, you're walking into this villa that's owned by this Medusa. What do you see that tells you this place is owned by a Medusa? And suddenly you get a lot more ornamentation and a lot more like flavor and depth than you would have otherwise. And so it kind of grew out of this, like kind of me personally just feeling kind of like frustrated by how hand wavy we are with fantasy, and like we don't really like dwell on the fantasy parts of it, which really irritates me. but no, it ends up being like just a great technique for all games, I think. So.
Awesome. Well, I want to take some time here now to really get into the nitty gritty, the keeper only stuff here. So this is a good point in the pod. If you're a player that's listening, either skip ahead or throw this at your GM or keeper and say, "Hey, run this for me. It sounds cool."
Or gaslight your GM. Just lie. Listen to this and then pretend you didn't.
Yeah,
Evil.
Now that we're keeper to keeper here.
Indeed, yeah.
I think one of the cool things we see this in a lot of like your trophy dark is that split into layers that you talked about. Yeah. I'm excited to hear how it went down to 3 from 5.
Yeah.
Because for the keepers, like you get that, like you said, that home invasion as all of the horrors that your players created come home to roost.
Mm-hmm.
And then your kind of custom adventure.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with that? Like what led to that, and how do you keep that structure?
Yeah, I kind of big picture. I'll go philosophical again if you don't mind.
Please.
I'm a big believer in there's actually a lot of power in linearity. I know that's like, people that, we for years and years have been like, oh, railroads, da, da, da. But I actually think there's a lot of power in linearity, and there's a lot of power, storytelling power in a tight structure, right? So I think that you can often accomplish more depth in a really linear structure than you can in a wide open structure, right? So in the Gauntlet, our sort of like one of our several sort of like clarion calls is depth, not width, right? It's this idea of like, yes, you have this structure, you have a kind of seemingly prescriptive thing here, but you're going to go really deep with it, right? You're by having this structure, this linear approach, it's actually a permission structure to like go really deep and like tell us like a lot more than you might otherwise. And so just at a high level, I just kind of believe in that. You can kind of see that in my game design. Like in Brindlewood Bay, you can't play any kind of character you want. You can only play elderly women who are part of a mystery book club. That's it, right? In the between, that's a playbook-based game, but each playbook has like a backstory that is like, it's very structured and follows a certain thing. And you're always going to hit the same narrative beats, but within that, you can kind of go really deep with it, right? You can give us lots of great detail. And so at a high level, I'm a big believer in kind of like a linear structure that gives you lots of space to go deep, right? But you're still kind of progressing forward, right? And so, so Trophy, I didn't write Trophy. That was by Jesse Ross. I am the publisher of it, but I did create that structure. So
yeah, right.
So that structure in Trophy Dark is like those, I think it's 5 rings. The characters are always kind of progressing to this like 5th ring. And each ring is always, generally speaking, in each scenario, it represents like a certain type of narrative beat, right? So ring 1 is like when things are kind of easy and we're just kind of learning the environment. Ring 2 is when we have to kind of deal with the environment and kind of struggle through it. Ring 3 is the very personal ring where we get to like share our personal stories and like be all angsty and stuff. Ring 4 is like the big monster encounter. And then ring 5 is the big crazy, Midsommar style operatic ending where we all go nuts, right? Like that is that's the structure of Trophy Dark, right? So I'm a big believer in these structures. I'm a big believer in like narrative beats. The campaign structure in my games, in the Carve from Brindlewood games, is just that, but kind of blown out at the campaign level. So every layer of the campaign represents like a certain like kind of shift in the overall narrative, right? And it kind of like opens up more things happening to the characters. So in the case of Brindlewood Bay, the murder mavens are getting deeper and deeper into the actual like conspiracy part of the story, right? As opposed to just the like kind of cozy murder mystery part of the story. And for the latchkeys, in the old version of Public Access, it was a 5-layer structure where the characters are basically essentially getting closer and closer to figuring out what happened to TV Odyssey, right? I have reduced it to 3 layers in the new edition, but all the same stuff is in there. It's just I want certain parts of it to trigger sooner, and so basically it's 3 layers, but there's like more in each layer. That just kind of it was just a kind of a necessary structural change, but all the same stuff happens. You kind of you start to learn more about the history of the town, and then the next layer progresses, and as you're watching Odyssey tapes, you are kind of inadvertently summoning these monsters from another universe that you're going to have to contend with during the Night of the Bone Wolves. And then after the Night of the Bone Wolves, the characters are pretty much like wrecked and spent at that point, and that's when TV Odyssey is like waiting on them, right? It's like, okay, now it's here, the final mystery. And so it's all about kind of narrative beats. It's about like that kind of really cinematic storytelling structure. And it's different for every game. Like in the between, it functions a little differently. But these games are campaign-based games. They have a start and they have an end. And that's kind of the idea, is just to guide you through the campaign.
So it's meant to be played in a campaign. What are your thoughts on like turning it into one of these scenarios into a one-shot? Does it really work that way, or does it lose its power?
It does. My Discord has less to say about this. They are. It is a whole like little sub school of thought on my Discord, how to run these games in a one shot. I don't do it because I just don't like to. But sometimes on a stream I will run it like in a 2-shot, because I think you need at least 2 sessions to do a whole mystery. But you can do it. I think the thing is certain parts of the game are not going to be as salient, obviously. Like, you're not going to get into that like deeper mystery, you're just not. There's no time. Yeah. You're not going to get into in public access, you might get to watch one Odyssey tape, but you're not going to get too deep into that. But you will be able to do like a mystery, and you will have a great time, and you'll get to experience every part of the kind of basic gameplay of the game. And so that's good. And hopefully it kind of makes you want to keep going, right? So when I'm running at a convention, or if I'm running like a 2-shot for a stream or something, like I usually just run it exactly as if I was running the game as a full campaign, and then we just stop. So that
would include introducing a new scenario the next day.
Yes, I will sometimes do that, knowing that they can't actually solve it.
Oh, the teaser!
I know, just to be like this is what this game is doing, just so you see. It's all about showing what the game is trying to do. But I do try to like give them at least enough space to solve that initial mystery. So yeah, you can do it. I mean, Brindlewood Bay works great as a one-shot because the scenarios are much more episodic. But the other games, the scenarios are kind of more interconnected. So it's a little trickier. But Brindlewood Bay is a pretty good one-shot because it's such an episodic game.
So question as a GM here: when you're mixing a lot of scenarios together, are you dropping like a clue from each scenario, like
I do.
at each location?
Well, not like a capital C clue, which is like a game term, but I do sometimes like hint at other scenarios, right? Like I'll kind of telegraph other scenarios. I do that all the time. Yeah, it just kind of makes the world feel a little bit more lived in and connected and organic, because the scenarios, like, we haven't really talked about this, but the scenarios are not really like great big blocks of prose, right? They're just like they're just like little toy boxes of stuff. Like, here's some characters, here's some clues, here's some locations, here's some dangers. And so you can kind of like take anything from them and just kind of use them wherever, right? There's no rules about not doing that. So
that's
you can.
A great description. Toy boxes of stuff.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Well, and it's a good point too about making the campaign world feel more lived in. I'm running a campaign now that's very broad and expansive, but bringing in NPCs that normally wouldn't be encountered until, say, Act 3, bringing them into Act 1, and it's making something familiar. So dropping characters from other clues.
Oh, you look like such a rock star too, right? You look like just a total rock star keeper when you do that, right? Like, and also in public access and the other games, you can actually go one step further with that too, and like, whenever a player does a paint the scene question, or whenever they like talk about a flashback, or they talk about their childhood, if you're paying attention as the keeper, you can take some of that stuff and incorporate it later down the road, right? And that's like the big mind blowing like rockstar GM moment, right? Like when you do that reincorporation, that it reincorporates stuff that they said, that's always really powerful.
How do you plan that?
just pay attention. You just got to pay attention. That's all it is.
Take notes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm at a level where I don't really take notes anymore. I just kind of I've done this enough, I guess. But no, you can. And also, but I just think there's like something to be said about it. Just sounds like trite advice, but it's the best advice for my games, which is you just have to pay attention. Like, just because players are constantly telling you what they're scared of and what they're interested in. They're constantly telling you that, right? And so it's best as a keeper to like pay attention to that and keep it in your back pocket, and, if a player does a flashback, talking about their, like, their alcoholic father or whatever, you have such a great opportunity to like introduce like little subtle thematic elements along those lines. Right. For example, so in the new edition of the game, you actually do a flashback in the very beginning. You kind of introduce your character. The first time we see your character is when they're a child. Right. And, this was actually in the bad spot, AP, if anybody cares to go watch it. It was the first episode, so it's not too much of a spoiler. But Jess Jewell's character talked about like her sort of like dad who would come home and drink beer and was like, kind of a negligent father, right? Well, what I did was when her character was exploring this abandoned house, this kind of like haunted house, she opens the refrigerator and I make sure her dad's brand of beer is there in the refrigerator, right?
Oh. Nice.
But that required listening, right? Like you have to like listen, it's those little things that players say. Anything can be something that you can reincorporate later. And it has like huge impact at the table, right? Like massive impact.
Right. These systems are unique in that you can ask the players to contribute more to the shared narrative. And just whenever you pass that ball to them, it doesn't mean you check out and relax for a bit. It's active listening to then bring that in later.
Bring it back in. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's kind of jump from there about bringing things back in. We kind of mentioned the Great Hungers and the Night of the Bone Wolves, right? That's like the ultimate reincorporation. Can you talk a little bit about, I'm excited to talk about how you came up with the idea to change those unscenes into make your own bosses to fight against.
Yeah,
it's a boss gauntlet.
Yeah. So in the game, in public access, you'll be periodically watching these Odyssey tapes. And at a certain point in the game, we get this like kind of out of character stinger scene where we see some of the characters from the Odyssey tapes come out of a cave and they're like in the world now. Then probably like usually 2 or 3 sessions later, these characters then attack the Latchkeys at night. And it's this part of the game called the Night of the Bone Wolves. And essentially there's an immediate like kind of short-term mystery the players have to solve, which is how do we make this house defensible? How do we like defend ourselves against these creatures? And so it's this really interesting moment where the players spent they gave you so much. They narrated these horrifying Odyssey tapes and they made the characters so horrifying and cool and like scary. And then you as the keeper get to take them and like make them the danger, and prior to them actually attacking the house, you kind of like pepper them throughout the scenes too. So you kind of like ask in the middle of a scene, you ask another player like, well, where is the Great Hunger in the scene? What are they doing in the scene? And they describe them in the background watching or whatever, So yeah, there's this like little build, but no, you're right. Like it's this idea of you watch the Odyssey tapes, the players like kind of define these like kind of like weird, kooky, scary characters. And then those characters become these like monstrosities that attack them, essentially like a siege, And
it's so unexpected too, I think, from a lot of these to be like, well, we were just talking about that weird TV show. You never go like, oh, they're going to come up and stab me.
And again, subverting player expectations. I think coming from a lot of other RPGs, players are used to the GM this is the prescribed baddie that is going to show up later, and it's like, oh, hoisted by my own petard. How could you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm happy to say that the new edition of the game. So in the old edition of the game, there's not a lot of keeper support for this. It just kind of says do it. But in the new edition of the game, there's a lot more keeper support in the text of like to kind of like show like how to make this effective at the table, like how to how to do it. So all of our games, when they finally reach crowdfunding, they have a lot more keeper support in them. So I'm really happy about that. I'm happy to like give keepers that, because it's kind of there's a few little like keepers always ask me, they're like, hey, anybody have any advice about the Night of the Bone Wolves? Or do you have any advice about the Chromatic Desert? Or do you have any advice about these things that Jason just kind of randomly mentions in the text, but doesn't really explore too much? That's all coming in Kickstarter. So
excellent. Yeah. So with these two, we mentioned a few things like the house on Escondido Street as a scenario. Alex ran Starlit Kingdom a while back. When you're looking at these as a campaign, you're coming in as the keeper. How do you decide which ones to start them on, which ones to incorporate?
The game text recommends you always start with the house on Escondido Street. You don't have to, but it's a strong recommend because it's the mystery that like kind of captures a lot of the game's bigger themes. And so it's kind of helpful in that way. But otherwise, I find that, so of the official published mysteries, there's probably about maybe 20 at this point. And they will all be in this new Kickstarter book and its supplement book that is also part of the Kickstarter. But third party, if you expand it to third party, there's probably like 50 or 60 out there, right?
Yeah.
And I find in general that the mysteries tend to fall into two buckets. Certainly the ones we publish do. One bucket is like genre horror. So like slashers and, weird supernatural horror and like very like genre horror. And then the other bucket is like weird science fiction, David Lynchian cosmic horror. Those are kind of the two big buckets. I like to do a mix. I think it's fun to have these like kind of strange mixed things. Okay. Quinn's from Quinn's Quest disagrees with this. He wishes they were all of one type. That's fine. I disagree. But no, you can kind of like tailor it that way. You can be like, okay, I'm going to do just like they're all going to be like kind of schlocky 80s horror mysteries or inspired mysteries, or they're going to be, they're going to be the weird, like Starlight Kingdom is one of the like more strange, like cosmic alien ones. Right. So you can kind of like choose it that way. I like a mix. I think it's fun to like not think about it too much and just see what happens,
Yeah. I like the, that you can fit any of those into the scaffolding and it kind of works. Cause that's like, sometimes you might have people go like, oh, well, I run a campaign and I can never run it again. It's like, no, you pretty much can again. It's just different mysteries.
One real distinct bit of advice I will say is a lot of the mysteries tend to have like as their premise like a bunch of kids that went missing, and so if you don't want Deep Lake and Degoya County to just be a bunch of lousy with missing kids, maybe like be careful there, I guess. But that's a pretty common setup in a lot of the mysteries. So maybe like space those out a little bit, but
Man, these grade schools
are
just so empty.
Just going missing everywhere. I know, yeah, constantly. Yeah.
Another recurring character is the big man. And this is very Lynchian. You've mentioned that before, and he's wild. He's kind of like a guide / narrative aside / your kind of intro to the Eldritch. Where'd you come up with him? Like, why is he in the campaign?
Yeah, the big man. I say the big man now, not the big man. I used to say the big man. Now I say the big man. There's a difference. The big man he's kind of like a combination of some of these like classic, these like really classic Lynchian characters, like this sort of like strange man from Lost Highway, like this like sort of narrator who kind of lives in between the spaces, sort of like a kind of liminal character who says cryptic things and then leaves. That's kind of his deal. This is a recurring thing in my games. I love the idea of these types of weird characters that just sort of show up and say something strange and then leave or don't explain themselves. And indeed, if you are paying attention to the people who are really deep into the so-called Brindleverse, which is right now just Brindlewood Bay, the Between, and Public Access, but there are others coming. Well, there's also some littler games, but those are the core games. If in the Brindleverse, the big man is kind of thought to be a version of a character that appears in these other games too, but just in a different form, And I guess there's something to be said about like the keeper having their character, you know, like the character they play that is sort of like the one they get to inhabit, you know, that's like their own. So I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I do like the sort of the weirdness of after the sessions, you have this like kind of log lady like stinger scene where the big man just says some strange things to the viewers at home that kind of maybe cryptically connects up to what's going on. And also there's just something interesting about like an NPC that is very consistent across the campaign, but that also changes as the campaign progresses, and that who the players in their own different ways like get really attached to, right? In a lot of ways, the big man is like the kind of he's almost like the spirit of public access. Like he's the we don't know what he is. I never say exactly what he is, but groups have their own interpretations of it, and the mystery of him is part of it. You know, like that's part of the fun of it. And so you could totally do it without him, but he adds a layer of the uncanny and kind of like, I don't know, like the big man almost makes it feel like it was always going to happen, you know? It's kind of powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and those stingers are really neat from like an energy side of things too, because like the players might be like, we're done with the mystery, we solved everything, we're winding down. And then, you have that moment and he starts talking about the Garden of Eden and the,
and also
the foolishness of man. And then you're like, okay, have a good week.
Yeah, and this is the thing in my games. Like The Between has a similar thing where like we see the mastermind out of character, a little stinger, or Brindlewood Bay has like you see the cult doing their thing. And this is a technique I love in gaming. You know,
it's also really interesting, as we talked a little bit earlier about. There can be arguments from people saying it's like, well, there wasn't an actual mystery, so you didn't actually solve anything because it's the players who are coming up with stuff. But by having these figures like the big man or whatnot that seem like a mastermind kind of figure that can keep showing up, it makes the players feel like they are still encountering some kind of deeper machination at play. So the player doesn't know that there's nothing written here. They're still kind of actively discovering it, but it is intentionally abstract, so you can derive the kind of meanings and suspense that you want from it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that I've actually never thought about it in terms of like creating like world coherency, but I guess that's what it does, right? Like there's this idea that like the big man makes it feel like it was always going to happen, you know, like it was always here, it was always going to happen, it was always going to be this way, and also you get the impression that it's maybe not the first time it's happened, right? Yeah. And that's also really intriguing in its own way.
Well, and he's not like omnipotent too. Yeah. Like he's there, he's narrating, but your characters still have to do the thing. He can't really stop it, which I think is important for these, because it's the classic, like, why would I ever help a sorcerer in D&D? They can solve it. They just wish and fix it. Like, why am I here?
Yeah.
Meta-wise, this has already happened at plenty of other tables as well. So that's like, it's a good feeling where everything lines up.
You know, you mentioned before about having multiple campaigns, it could be very fun to have the big man show up and give some obscure hints, maybe about this one, referencing the past campaign or something like that as ways to tie in.
That'd be pretty intriguing. Yeah. Well, and also, and like I said, that character, I never like to say exactly this is the case, but I think most people believe it is. That character shows up in my other games too. So he's called the Man in the Sun Mask in The Between, or in The Between Ghosts of El Paso, he's this character called Del Sol. Like the sun is always yellow, and the sun is always like a recurring motif with him. Whenever you see the sun or you see the color gold or yellow, you know I'm doing a big man reference. So there's also like he also has like an evil counterpart that also shows up in the games in different ways, and so that part of it's fun too, because in my Discord server at least, everyone loves that kind of like that more like kind of meta level. Like they really love that. They love to talk about like what it all means. And then what's really cool, this is kind of getting what you were saying, Lex, like they start to talk about it, not in terms of like what I meant when I wrote the game, but what it means through the lens of the campaign they played, right? So it's like, well, we did this, and so I think the big man is this, or I think the man in the mask is this, or the sort of his moon counterpart is this, right? So there's this, I don't know, like once you kind of really get into it, especially if you have a group that's kind of playing the various games, you start to make those connections, and you start to like, you know, you start to like connect up things in a bigger way. And the games have trained you to do this because you're already doing it at the mystery level, right? So yeah, it's just another part of the fun.
Yeah, and you get that same like the different levels of it too that you see where there's like the very personal mystery of like, okay, why is this person the way they are? And you're figuring that out through the campaign with those flashbacks. And you're also figuring out what's going on broadly.
And then you can keep going. You connect it up to Brindlewood Bay, you connect it up to the Tween, and yeah, it keeps like unfurling out, you know.
Yeah, I can't believe nerds like to theory craft. So this is
imagine
wild. Yeah. One thing I also appreciate from this, I watched the chili cook-off episode today
very silly,
of The Bad Spot, and one of the things I appreciated about the style of this is every NPC seems shady as hell. And you really can get away with that because it's up to the players to put it together.
Yep, that's exactly right. The chili cook-off is one of the Lost Transmissions. It's a really unusual thing because it's so tonally different from the rest of the game. Like it is a sort of like grindhouse splatterpunk scenario. But because it's a Lost Transmission, you can do it and it doesn't interfere with the main TV Odyssey campaign because it's kind of its own thing. But you know, you're right. Like it's really very forgiving as the keeper because you can kind of just like say or do whatever, and maybe you even like present something accidentally, you know, and that's okay because we're going to give it meaning later. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it works too for like NPCs that I wouldn't think would become helpful to them too. There's cases where it's like, oh, this person from a mystery now is someone they keep going back to.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a fun reincorporation too.
Yeah, I love it, and it's just such a great like you know you're doing it right when like the players are really excited to see a certain side character, right? When they're excited about a certain NPC, they're like you know that like everything's going right, and in some sense the big man is like me as the game writer, like giving that to you as the keeper. Like here's the guy they're all gonna love, right? So you've got this guy if nothing else.
Yeah.
You know.
One thing, there was a bit of advice in the version I read, at least, that I liked a lot is don't let dangerous scenes take up the whole session and don't always focus on the disturbing aspects of a mystery. We've talked a lot on here about our speedrunners. We have a lot of players that you say, all right, you have a week to solve this mystery, and they'll go, all right, I'm breaking into the library tonight. I'm going to go find the autopsy guy and punch him until I get mysteries. Yep.
Got a case of Red Bulls?
Have it solved by 8 a.m. No problem. Like, how do you keep the pacing that they're not just constantly pushing towards that they have that moment to breathe and talk about, like you said, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Yeah, well, importantly, in my games, they have a structure that I consider to be cinematic. And what that means to me, at least in part, is this idea that we don't like follow the characters every single moment of the day, right? We only focus on them at the cool parts. so we assume they're always like just doing whatever they're doing, and the times that we're with them, the scenes that we see, those are just the really cool times, right? And so, you know, in my games, like a whole day phase might just be the characters like exploring a couple of rooms or a couple of like places. That doesn't mean that that's all they did all day. It just means that's just what we focused on for this day phase, and whatever they did the rest of the day is kind of none of our business, right? Like we just care about the cool things they did on the investigation. So that's the start. Like you have to kind of like set this expectation that time is passing, you know, like we might be like 3 weeks ahead of last session, right? Like last session ended on day 1 and now we're on day 20, right? And what happened in between? I don't know. You're just young people goofing off for the summer. Like, who knows what you did, or maybe you were just kind of freaked out by what happened last time. So you just decided to chill for a little bit or whatever. Right. The key is like, you emphasize to the players that we're just focusing in on the cool parts, right? Like in a movie or TV show, you don't see every beat of every day of the characters' lives. You only see the cool parts, right? And so that's one, just as a kind of like practice, is you convey that like, we're not role playing every moment, right? Because you get these like players who want to like be busybodies and like do the whole thing all at once, right? And so you kind of set an expectation straight away that like, we're just kind of focusing in on the cool stuff, and otherwise the latchkeys are going about their day or their week, And so that's a good start. Also, I really think that there's a core gameplay loop you have to engage in this game as the keeper. It's really, really important as the keeper, in order to get the core gameplay loop going, it's important that you inflict conditions on the characters, whether that be through as a reaction from a mixed die result, or whether you just ask them a question, how are you feeling right now? And you give them a condition based off that. Inflicting conditions is like a major, major part of your job as the keeper, because if you don't inflict conditions, for one thing, you can't like tap those conditions to make their lives difficult, but also they have no reason to try to get those conditions cleared, right? So
they don't need to rest.
Yeah. So the way you get the conditions cleared is you do what's called the nostalgic move. And that is when you sit around the living room talking about Fangoria or talking about Ninja Turtles or talking about whatever. And that's how you clear conditions, by kind of having those like role play scenes at the house. You also get to find a clue in the middle of that. You kind of think of something or you stumble on something. But for the most part, the idea is you are just chilling and trying to clear your head and trying to and you bond, right? It's the role play.
Yeah.
And so, you have to, so as a keeper, there's a real practical thing you can do, which is you got to give them conditions, because they're eventually going to want to clear those conditions. and that's how you get them to slow down and go talk about Ninja Turtles,
Yeah, that's how you get the numbers guys in there.
Exactly
you say that's a -1 to your roll there.
Oh, it's worse than that. It's a disadvantage, right? Like if you have a condition, you put them at disadvantage, which is like you roll 3d6 and take the two lowest. It's a very hard roll, right? So they want to get them cleared. And also, if you have more than 3 and you take a fourth one, you have to turn a key. So your character's one step closer to being permanently dead, right? So like there's a big incentive to clear those conditions. And so that's how you kind of get them to slow down. A really clever GM or keeper will give conditions that the players don't want to clear, because it's so narratively cool, or it memorializes something really cool in the story. Then they don't want to clear it, and now they have a problem, because it's like, oh, I want to keep this condition, but I've already got 3 conditions. What am I going to do? And so that's when you get into some really fun, sticky role play,
Yeah, and I noticed too, one thing you do as well a lot with these is you'll flash between like someone watching an Odyssey tape and then someone investigating, which I thought was a neat way to be like, okay, we're still doing the prompts, but it gives like a slow down time while you're investigating.
Yeah, I'm a smash cut guy. I'm a big believer in I'm a smash cut keeper, right? Like dice on the table, boom, roll your dice. Next, let's go to the next guy. All right, role play, roll some dice, go to the next guy. That's just how I run a game in general. But indeed, for the Odyssey tapes, that's how you're supposed to run the game. You're supposed to bounce between them. So, yeah.
Let's talk about the Kickstarter proper that's coming up. The version of this, it sounds like there's quite a few changes. What's kind of the big hotness coming up?
Yeah, so the game has been out for a few years, and the version that's out is very good, very playable, and many people have played it. But our games always have kind of like a long digital-only life, so that we have time to really play them and get to know them and spend time with them and kind of learn them even more, right? And so in those years that we've had the game out there in the world, I've run it a lot, and I've seen people playing it and talking about it. And so I've learned a lot about the game. And so now I'm ready to kind of take that learning and put it into a physical form, right? We did a play test last year of this thing called Skinny Jeans, which was a sort of like, I was playtesting some like new concepts in the game, basically. And so we did that playtest for about a year, kind of playing public access with this kind of slightly different rule set. And now I've taken all the learning from the original release, from Skinny Jeans, and now I'm making it into this like Kickstarter edition. Quinn's described it as 0.8, 0.9, and 1.0, and that's basically what it is, right? So this is 1.0 that we're finally bringing to Kickstarter, and there's going to be, I would say the biggest change from the original game is that the TV Odyssey mystery, the TV station mystery, is much more tightly integrated into all of it. So previously, TV Odyssey was always just kind of in the background. You would do an Odyssey tape, and that was cool and fun, but otherwise you didn't really like think too much about what happened to TV Odyssey. It was just at a certain point, the fifth layer triggered and you had to go do the TV Odyssey mystery, right? And this new version, it's much more tightly integrated into the whole experience. So now you have this new question called the Odyssey question. So this is a question that exists apart from the normal mystery questions. And it's basically what happened to TV Odyssey, right? And you are trying to get Odyssey clues. And the way you get Odyssey clues, there's two ways. Watching the tape. So now when you watch the tape, you don't just watch the tape and have a cool little scary story together. You also have to, as a group, define an Odyssey clue. You have to define something like this tells us something about TV Odyssey. What? You know, and so then you come up with something. Yeah. And then also you can get an Odyssey clue if when you are answering a question for another mystery, if you roll good enough, then the answer to that question on the mystery is also an Odyssey clue. And so it's like you're taking the solutions to the mysteries and tightly connecting them up to TV Odyssey. That did not exist in the original edition. In the original edition, the mysteries were very like kind of like they happened, but they didn't feel like connected to the bigger story. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so we've really, really tightened that up and really made TV Odyssey really central to the experience. And it's the game I thought I was making the first time, but now I am. I have made it this time. So so that's a big change. The structure is slightly different. It's a slightly tighter structure. The original edition of the game went about 20 sessions. This one's about 15. So a little tighter, and it has a bigger emphasis on like getting into the characters' backstories quicker. I think it maybe took a little too long to get into the character backstories in the older edition. So now we kind of get into it just a little faster in this one. And it's not too different. I mean, it's just different enough, and it's in a physical book, so you should definitely go get the Kickstarter version. But it's not like drastically different. Like if you love public access, you're going to recognize this, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, I keep seeing mock-ups that you're posting, and it looks very enticing. So,
well, there's going to be a second book too, right? So there's the first book, which is all that, and then the second book is called Signals from the Other Side, which is just more mysteries, and then this like lost transmission style mystery, and then it also has a section that explores certain setting elements more that are just kind of hinted at in the original game, but they're kind of fleshed out a little bit more in this new game. And then and we're going to have some cards. So you will be able to get the Odyssey tapes in a box of cards that look like VHS tapes. And the box is a clamshell VHS.
Nice.
Oh, man. Container. That's aimed directly at me. This is terrible.
So those are the three things we're kickstarting.
Excited.
Excellent. Excellent. We hope these insidious whispers are helpful in addressing this topic at your table. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to things we discussed in the episode, like actual plays, any RPG resources we can share, and an invite to our lab's Discord to discuss more reanimations and consultations. We also post these episodes and resources to our Patreon that's free to follow, or if you like, you can make a charitable donation to help us keep the ominously flickering lights on at the H. West Memorial Mortuary and Laboratories. Jason, the Kickstarter coming up March 17th, was it?
Indeed, March 17th, yep.
Excellent. Anything else we should keep an eye out for you in? You're always running games.
Yeah, I think if you have not looked at the games I'm running for the Bad Spot YouTube channel, which we mentioned briefly, that is a fantastic YouTube channel in general, but also Matt has very kindly allowed me to run both the Between and Public Access, and actually The Lands Remaining coming out soon too. So I've got actual plays, full campaign arcs on Matt's channel.
Excellent. So until next time.
Thanks for listening to RPG Reanimators.
Where your games can die.
Or live.
In the Odyssey tapes.
Well, that's a shame because we're going to make the title card of this, your little quote, be like, I disagree with Quinn's. And then the faces pointing
He knows
everywhere.
I disagree with him.
They're just like pointing in red arrows.
I actively when he interviewed me, I actively disagree with him. It's like, you're wrong. That is wrong. Like, that's not.